am obsessed.
Here she is. Oh my god, I'm literally so excited.
God damn the writing in this book. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today is the beginning of a new reading vlog, and in this one I am going to be doing translated literature. So recently I have been really obsessed with translated literature. I've bought a bunch of it over the past couple of months, and I wanted to make a video going through as much of it as I possibly could. But because I have so much of it now, I decided to split this up into a couple of different videos, and those will be coming later. But this one today is about my Spanish translated fiction. So, without further ado, let's get into what I'll be reading. Okay, so the books that I'm hoping to read in this vlog are Die My Love by Ariana Harwicks, Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and People in the Room by Nora Lange. So I don't know much about either of these. I just know that they were both translated from Spanish, and they both follow kind of unlikable or unreliable female main characters, which you know is my shit, so I'm excited to get into these. And Love in the Time of Cholera was a gift from my best friend for Christmas, so her and I are going to be buddy reading this one. So these are the books that I'll be reading in this reading vlog, and I'm going to get to reading now. Okay, let's talk. So I am reading Die My Love by Ariana Harwicks. I have gotten to page 40, and I am obsessed. I started reading this book, and the first line blew me away. I was already like, God damn the writing in this book. So it says, I lay back in the grass among fallen trees, and the sun on my palm felt like a knife I could use to bleed myself dry with one swift cut to the jugular. God damn. So needless to say, I am pretty much obsessed with this writing style. It's very strange. Like, I'll just put that out there. I don't know how much of that relates to the translation, or if in Spanish this author's writing is very odd anyway. But between her writing and the way that it was translated, it is not only odd, but also so beautiful. And the language and the images that she uses are just magnificent. Like, I am so in love with this writing. The one thing that I've noticed stylistically, which is very interesting, is there aren't really like quotation marks or delineations of when people are speaking. So since it's first person, she kind of just is hearing everything that's going on, and there's no delineation of my husband speaking or she's speaking or whatever. So there's no quotation marks. Everything kind of runs together, and they're in these like long paragraph forms where there's no like dialogue tags or anything like that. It's very just one big section, and there aren't really chapters either. It's like the section begins with a, you know, bigger letter, and then it just starts again in a couple of pages. So that's definitely an interesting choice, just how the book looks. It's not necessarily hard to follow, it just does make you like pause and think about what's being said. And there also are sections where you're like, is this a dream? Is this real? Because they're like really out there. Which I love for like the whole, you know, sad girl descending into madness thing. Like, if you can't really tell if the narrator is, you know, being truthful about what's happening, or if it's just in their head and they are being truthful from their own perspective, but you can't really suspend your disbelief enough to believe that that's really true. I also wanted to mention that immediately when I started reading this, I desperately wanted to pick up a pen and start annotating it. Within like the first lines, I was like, oh sis, I need to annotate because this is just too good. It's too good not to annotate. But then I kept reading it and I was like, if I annotated this book right now, I would be annotating every single line and that would be ridiculous. So I'm just going to go through it and enjoy the writing. Maybe if I do a reread later on in my life, I can go back and have a little bit closer eye of what I want to actually annotate. But I know that if I did it now, I would have tabs everywhere, underlines everywhere. I couldn't hold myself back. So I'm just trying to take my time, soak in the language, and I love it so much. So this is pretty random, but as I was reading the book, there's a part in the book that says, like a wet shirt, clammy against the body, something that doesn't go away, that won't come unstuck. So as I read That Won't Come Unstuck, I was literally listening to Riptide by Vance Joy. And in that song, he says, come unstuck. And I read that at the same time as he said it in the song, which was so weird. I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, so something I have noticed in this book is the husband is a dick. I mean, that seems to be the theme of a lot of these, like, unlikable female characters. There usually isn't a nice husband with them. They're usually terrible. So she keeps getting hurt, and her baby got hurt, which was really sad and really hard to read. But the husband seems to blame her for everything, even though she is mentally ill and she was just in the hospital. But he blames her for the son getting hurt and is like, why aren't you taking care of our child? And from my perspective, I'm like, dude, you were also in the room when the child got hurt, so why aren't you looking after your kid? So where I'm at right now, the mother has been in the woods with her baby for like hours, and people are searching for her, trying to find her. And she comes across a deer, and this is her discussion of the deer, and it's just absolutely beautiful, so I wanted to read it to you. The stag stops in his tracks, embalmed, eyes of glass. He's so touchingly still. He's the man of my life, the one who can see into my infinite sadness. The others are just men. What good are men when they speak a language that falls short? My real man isn't human, I know, but who wants to be human? Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Okay, so this is totally unrelated to the books that I'm reading, but I'm about to join a live webinar with Tui T. Sutherland, who wrote the entire Wings of Fire series, because her new book, The Dangerous Gift, is out today. And my lovely boyfriend surprised me with tickets to go to this webinar so that I can listen to her talk about the book and potentially do a Q&A. I don't know, but I am so excited. So I'm just waiting for the webinar to start, and I will tell you more about it when it's done. But oh my God, I'm literally so excited, and I'm just so grateful that my boyfriend decided to do that for me. It was so thoughtful, and I'm very excited, as you can tell. Good morning. It's a new day. It's very bright outside and I'm right by a window, so excuse my squinting. But last night I got to do the wonderful webinar with Tui T. Sutherland, and I didn't film much of it obviously, but it was so amazing. She talked a lot about her writing process, and those are kind of the things that like my boyfriend and I often talk about with the series. We talk about obviously like the plot and characters and stuff, but we really talk a lot about the process of writing it and what she must have been thinking when she was writing it, and like all of those kind of discussions. And it was so cool to hear her perspective on how she actually plans out a huge series of books like that, and actually her lack of planning, because she's not very organized, she said, which is kind of funny. But it was a really cool experience, and I'm so happy that I got to do it. It really made my day yesterday. I'm going to go read some more of Die My Love with my wonderful iced coffee, because always have an iced coffee, and I will update you when I have more to say about it. Okay, this is also kind of random, but I'm literally freaking out. I'm so excited. So Noelle Gallagher designed a necklace with Ana Luisa, a sustainable jewelry company. And they were sold out when I went on the website. And then I went back on there to send a screenshot to someone, and I saw that there was literally one left. And I purchased it like 3 days ago, and it's already here. I'm freaking out. So I have the bag and I'm just gonna open it. I'm so excited. Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh my god, it's so pretty. Oh my goodness. Do you see that? Oh my goodness. Do you see this? That is so freaking pretty. I love it so much. Here she is. I'm so excited. Yay! Okay, we need to talk. So, last night I finished Die My Love by Ariana Harwicks, and 5 out of 5, first of all, like, loved it. It is such a weird book. I'll just put that out there. Like, it is so strange and so trippy, and like you really can't tell if what she's saying is real or not. Which I really love. It's truly an unreliable narrator story. On the back, it talks about this book being in the tradition of like Sylvia Plath and Clarice Lispector, but I also think it works really well for kind of a Charlotte Perkins Gilman vibe, like a Yellow Wallpaper vibe. Just woman is trapped and maybe has postpartum depression or something like that, postpartum psychosis, and just can't function, cannot be a parent, can't be a mother, and is just really struggling with their mental health. And I think that that is a pretty similar kind of vibe and idea to the Yellow Wallpaper. I felt like it definitely took time to piece together exactly what was going on, because it is so all over the place, and it doesn't feel, it is linear, I believe, but it doesn't feel linear in that it doesn't have like a plot really. It's kind of just, you're following her around and you're like, oh, is this man that she's talking about, is it really a person that she's cheating on her husband with, or is it imagined? And you kind of find out that it is a real person, but in a way you kind of never know if it's real or not. So I'll be honest, I got partway through this book and immediately knew that it was going to be a 5 out of 5 for me, and I ordered Feeble Minded, her other book, and I love that cover. And also, like, these two together, are they not just a beautiful pairing? Like, wow, I'm obsessed with these copies of these books. I definitely would like to go out and get some of the other titles in this like publishing house's collection, because these are really, really pretty and so far have been great. I may or may not tack it on to this video depending on how long it takes me to get through everything else, but I really, really loved this book. It was a 5 out of 5 for me, and I'm obsessed with it, so I would highly, highly recommend this if you can get your hands on it. I will put it out there that I don't think this is for somebody who has any kind of postpartum psychosis or depression or ever has, or someone who is triggered by discussion of self-harm or anything like that. It is a serious book in that way, but I think if you can handle reading about those things, this book is absolutely beautiful, and it handles all of those topics with the utmost care and beauty of language, and I think that that's really to its credit. So yes, I am obsessed with Ariana Harwicks, and I'm very excited to continue reading her other books, and also to get to the other books that I'm planning on reading. I'm going to be reading People in the Room next, so I will let you know when I get into that one. As you can probably tell, I am still at work, though no one has been here in hours and we're almost about to close, but I have made some progress in People in the Room. I am at page 44, and I'm kind of bored, I'll be honest. I'm like having a hard time getting through this, honestly. I feel like when I'm reading it, I'm kind of like floating on the surface of the words rather than like fully getting into them. I don't know how really to explain that other than just I'm reading the words, I'm understanding what they're saying, but I'm just not connecting with it at all. I thought that this book would be very similar to the other female main character, unreliable narrator stories that I'd read, but I didn't realize that this was actually written, when was it written? Yeah, so this was written in 1950. So I am kind of struggling to get through this, I'll be honest. Not super loving it. But on the other hand, I have actually started Love in the Time of Cholera as well, and I'm listening to it on audio while also looking at the physical book so I can see the pictures, and I'm having a much better time with that. I really like the writing of it. I really like the characters and the story so far, and I'm excited to continue reading that one. So I'm going to go close up here at the library, and I will talk to you later. Okay, so at this point, I have gotten about a quarter of the way through Love in the Time of Cholera, and it really is not what I was expecting, honestly. I thought that it would read a lot more like a classic, and I think it is kind of a modern classic, technically, but it doesn't feel that way to me. This was written in the 80s, I believe, which was an interesting realization. Somehow I just didn't check the publishing information and didn't realize that it was published in 1988, the English translation, 1988. But the part that does make it feel somewhat like a classic is it is, I guess, technically a historical fiction because it talks about the 1870s and then it goes to the 1930s. That's like the approximate time frame. It follows its main characters when they're teenagers, but then when they're also late in their lives. So it's a very interesting dynamic seeing the historical aspects of it play out. But also, I just wasn't expecting it to be such a fun, funny read. Honestly, it's very funny. There's a lot of lines in here that are very snarky and fun, and it's really, really cute to see the romance play out. It is serious in some ways. There are deaths discussed in the beginning of the book, so that part of it is serious. There is like a suicide in the beginning, so that part of it is more intense. The part that I'm at right now is just about the two main characters when they were younger and how they were in love and then they grew apart and had to be separate and then eventually come back together, maybe, I'm not sure yet. But I just wasn't expecting it to be so cute and sweet. I was just expecting it to feel more like a classic, and I was very pleasantly surprised so far. So that's about where I'm at so far with it. Like I said, I'm really enjoying it. I really love looking at the pictures. I have been using the audiobook to get through it. The narrator of the audiobook is really, really great. I would highly recommend. As for People in the Room by Nora Lange, I have made a bit of progress. I'm on page 50 now. Not that much progress, honestly. But I'm just still having a really hard time getting into it. I'm not sure if I'm going to DNF this. We'll find out. I'm just not really able to get into it. I might want to shift my focus to read Ariana Harwick's other book instead, but it's a little disappointing, but I'm glad that I'm really enjoying this one because that definitely makes up for it. Okay, so it's getting pretty dark, but before it gets completely dark, I just wanted to let you know that I am DNFing People in the Room. Here's the thing, I really wanted to like this, and I think that the concept is interesting, and I think that if you're looking at it from a metaphorical perspective and trying to analyze it, I think that there's a lot of room here for analysis, but I'm simply not enjoying it, honestly. It was kind of putting me into a weird reading slump, which is just really unfortunate. Like, I was trying to read this, and because this was the thing that I told myself I had to read, I was really avoiding reading. Like, this whole vlog so far has taken me like a week and a half to 2 weeks to get up to this point because I've just been putting this off. So I'm going to shift my focus. I'm going to continue listening to Love in the Time of Cholera, which I am actually enjoying. And let me grab it. I'm going to be reading Feeble-Minded instead because this is pretty short and I'm more excited to read it, and you'll still be getting a decent vlog out of it, I hope. So sorry that I cannot fully review this one, but I just could not deal with how bored I was anymore. Okay, I haven't updated you guys in quite a while. Honestly, everything's been crazy. I started a new job. I'm now working 2 jobs. So I'm working at my favorite local coffee shop now, as well as the library. So that's been pretty hectic. But I am officially like 30 pages into Feeble-Minded by Ariana Harwick's, and I am like 40% into Love in the Time of Cholera. So to be completely honest, I don't like Feeble-Minded as much as I loved Die My Love. The writing style is pretty similar. Obviously, it's the same author, and I think it's actually a different translator. I might be wrong, but I think that definitely does change what the words and the phrases sound like. It's a little bit harder to understand than Die My Love was, because Die My Love, it definitely was a lot to take in, but I felt like there was a plot, and there was some kind of structure to it that I could understand, like the thread of what was happening. But Feeble-Minded, so far, it's not a lot of plot, and it's not a lot of concrete things that I can point to and say, this is what's going on in the book. So it's a little bit confusing, but I am enjoying the writing of it. I'm enjoying the style, and it just takes a lot more brain effort to figure out what's being said. But since it is a beautiful day here in New York, it's like 60 degrees, I'm going to go roller skating. And while I do that, I'm going to listen to the audiobook for Love in the Time of Cholera. So let's do it. Okay, so it has been a very long day. I was at work at the coffee shop for 8 hours and it was extremely busy, so I probably look very haggard. But I finished Feeble-Minded by Ariana Horowitz while I was at work. I did get a little bit of time to read. I ended up reading just like the last 30 pages of the book. And I have a lot of thoughts. So when I started the book, I was confused, not loving it as much as Die My Love. By the end of the book, I was obsessed, so I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars just to account for when I didn't really like the beginning. But Ariana Horowitz does not disappoint, I'll tell you that. I think that the confusion actually works in the book's favor. It makes sense when you get to the end and you are like, oh, that's why everything is so confusing. I think the reason why it was so confusing is because as readers, we're just completely thrown into her mind at the get-go. There's not really any explanation of why her mind is the way it is, and you're kind of figuring that out as you go. So the only time that she actually makes any sense is when she's away from her mother, and that says a lot about the kind of relationship that they have. And it actually is kind of a generational trauma thing, because her mother's mother had some issues, and then, you know, she lived with the narrator's mother and created those issues, and then they were passed down again. And there's definitely some like medication / alcohol mixing happening, which is just a whole other issue. But it is very clear that the family dynamics that our narrator, who's unnamed, her family dynamics are not very good, and it's putting her in a situation where her brain is very mixed up and jumbled, and then as a reader, we're getting that. So the only time that it really makes any sense plot-wise or what's going on is when she's, you know, stepped away from her mother momentarily. So the main character, or the narrator in the story, is kind of obsessed with this one man, and there's a lot of discussion of sex and sexual relationships, and kind of where her need for sex in such abundance in huge quantities comes from. And I think a lot of that has to do with her mother and how she was raised. Her mother was extremely open with her about it, to the point where she actually encouraged her daughter actually to have sex at an early age, and may have also facilitated rape potentially. So I will put it out there that there's not a lot of like explicit discussion of these things, but it is kind of put in there to kind of get you thinking about the psychology of the character. So it is a lot in that aspect, but it doesn't really go into details about anything. It kind of just alludes to things that have happened in her past, her relationship with her father, past like sexual partners and things, but it doesn't really delve super deeply into those. I did want to read you an interesting quote discussing kind of her perspective on her mother. They do definitely enable each other and facilitate each other's, you know, alcoholism and sex addictions and all of that. But there is a point where our narrator thinks her mother is gone, and she says this: "I'm an orphan, and I see myself in front of my ancestors' graves, liberated, an empowered urchin, unhinged happiness." So the thought that she might be an orphan because her father's gone. Now her mother, she thinks, is gone. And she feels empowered and like she has this abundance of happiness is pretty telling into the psychology of her character. So I think in the beginning, I was just really confused about how everything fit together plot-wise. And once I kind of got back into the rhythm of her writing style and trying to get into the new character's head, I think that I had a much deeper appreciation for all of the literary tools and devices Ariana Harwicks was using to portray all these different things about the character. So I appreciate you listening to me nerding out. I am, in fact, an English major, so I had to go into all of that. But I actually really enjoyed this book. I know that when I started, I was not loving it, but it ended up being a 4 out of 5, and I would highly recommend it if you're interested in those kind of things. Okay, so it is almost the end of March at this point. I've been doing this vlog all month, but I have finally finished Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It was a giant book. It was a very long audiobook, but I got through it, and honestly, I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5. Like I said, it didn't really read like a classic, though I did notice later on there was a lot of terminology and language that was a bit antiquated or things that would not be acceptable in today's day and age. So there's definitely that aspect of it to just look out for. I will say that it did get a bit long. There were definitely sections that I think not necessarily that they weren't necessary for the story, but they just felt a little bit long and not really dealing with the central plot that was going on. And his writing style just tends to be very descriptive of everything going on. So I felt like we got very well-rounded characters, which was really great, but it definitely did make it a little bit of a longer book. Something that surprised me the most about it was how explicit it was. I was not expecting it to be that much relating to sex, honestly. Like, I knew that it was going to be about a relationship and kind of this like love triangle-esque thing over time. So I figured there'd be some of that, but like with the main character, the main male character, he waits for the female character for years, and then finally he's like, well, screw it, I'm just gonna go sleep around. And all of his escapades, like there's so much detail and description of all the things that happen. So I'm fine with that, but like I just wasn't expecting it to be so in your face and how explicit that it was. Later on, there also is a very inappropriate, problematic relationship between an old man and a very young girl. So I wasn't a big fan of that. It kind of ruined the end for me a little bit. In a way, you're rooting for the male lead the whole time, hoping that he'll eventually get the girl, and that's kind of where the book is heading since her husband dies at the beginning of the book. So you're like expecting it to happen and looking forward for it to happen. And then towards the end, he gets involved with this really young girl when he's like in his 70s or 60s, which is just really inappropriate and not okay. And that was really hard to read, especially after we'd gone this whole time rooting for him. Even though he is kind of a problematic character, you were still holding out hope that everything would work out and that it would be great. And then that happened, and I'm kind of like, I don't like you anymore, man. The thing that I think works really well with this book, though, is that it feels realistic, not only to the time period, but to the reality of people's lives. I mean, people have really complicated lives. This book takes place from the main characters being teenagers all the way to them being 80 years old. So the amount of loves and losses and relationships and complications and everything in between that happen in a person's life, there are so many of those, and they're all kind of encompassed in this book. And which is why it is so long, and there's a lot of detail and description, I think. But I liked that about it because it felt realistic, and it felt like everything that happened to these characters was actually put in here, and it gave you an entire scope of who their character is, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. Unfortunately, that led us to a problematic, incredibly problematic relationship between our male lead and a young girl. But on the other hand, it does give an entire picture of him as a person, which I think is an interesting perspective to have. I'm absolutely not condoning what happened between him and the girl, but I also appreciated how honest that Gabriel Garcia Marquez was in portraying these characters. There wasn't one of them is perfect and the other one is terrible, or both of them are terrible, or both of them are perfect. They both have serious character flaws and are very problematic in some ways, for sure. but they also have certain qualities that bring them together. And it's kind of up to the reader to decide whether or not them being together is a good thing or not. At the end of the day, it's kind of up to us as readers to decide whether or not the relationship was even worth all of those years of pining. Because honestly, you want this satisfying ending of they lived happily ever after and all of that, but they're also 80 years old and they don't have that much more of their lives to live. And it feels kind of not worth all of that struggle and heartache over their lives to get to where they are. So I guess it's really just up to us to decide whether or not these people really do belong together, or if the whole thing was in vain and just completely absurd. So I like that about it, because you can really analyze their relationship and come to your own determination of, is it a good thing or is it not a good thing? So as I said, I gave this a 4 out of 5 just because it was getting lengthy and also all of the problematic things that I spotted in this book. I didn't want to give it a 5 out of 5 because of those things. So just to give you a little wrap up, I read Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Die My Love and Feeble Minded by Ariana Harwicks in this vlog. Overall, it was a really, really great experience reading these books. I did DNF people in the room, but that's okay. I got some really good reading out of this vlog, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe, because there's going to be a part 2 and 3 and 4 of the translated literature reading vlogs, so stay tuned for those, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!